All right. So, thank you so much, Rabbi Weiss, for having us in your place, and it's my pleasure to meet you. Actually, we are here, to answer several questions. A lot of people wondering about the issue of Zionism, the ideology of Zionism, and Judaism as a religion. As you are well known, you are against Zionism, and you don't believe in Zionism, and even you don't believe in the state of Israel, which is based on the ideology of Zionism. Since the creation of Israel, it's based on the Zionism ideology. So could you please tell us why you are anti-Zionism?
With the help of the Almighty, first I pray to the Almighty to bestow upon me His truth, His wisdom, that I may be a worthy messenger of conveying this truth and so sanctify His name and bring peace to the world. Amen. The concept of Zionism is truly a contradictory and the diametric opposite of what Judaism is. In history, Judaism is thousands of years, it's a religion. Zionism is a movement, a political movement that started a mere 100-odd years ago, 130, 140 years ago. Judaism as a religion means subservience to the Almighty, to uphold a covenant that Jewish people made with the Almighty, to obey His rules and laws, which is given in the Torah, which was given on Mount Sinai some 3,000 years ago. In a nutshell, it says you must emulate the Almighty. We say in Hebrew, Mahu Rachum Avatute Rachum.
You have to translate.
Yes, which is a similar Rachum. It means that just as God is compassionate, you must be compassionate. We should be emulating God and keeping all the commandments that is required from the Almighty to us. Zionism, which started this 100-odd years ago, is a concept of a totally other issue. It's a materialistic concept. It's nationalism, to have a piece of land, to be a nation proud amongst other nations, which entails an army, an Olympic team, and all the trappings of a base material concept of a nationhood. It not only that, but it is in essence devoid of godliness. Sometimes they call themselves, very arguably, they call themselves a democracy, or so things like that. So, but in essence, it's removing God from the equation. They proudly announce that you don't have to be religious. It's free of religion. It's an essence. It's a democracy, which again has in their own statements they have full of contradictions and hypocrisy, which we'll get into, but contradictions in the fact that they want to call themselves a Jewish state, at the same time they're saying they're a democracy, the only democracy in the Middle East, and so forth. So really, in its essence, is it. Now, let us just take the concept of this Zionism is that you don't have to be subservient to God. So right away in its root, in its issue, that is blasphemy and heresy for the Jewish people. We have our whole being, our whole purpose of being is to be subservient to God. The Almighty commanded us at the time of giving the Torah on Mount Sinai that we have to uphold the Torah. If we will uphold the Torah, then God wanted us and required of us to go to the Holy Land and to live there. The people that were living there at the time, which was probably now it's time to get into all the details of the concepts of Judaism and how this went, but some people were reluctant to go. They were punished, the ones that were called the heir of Rav, a certain element of that had come to Judaism. Therefore the Jews were punished. They didn't go to conquer, they went because God required us to be accepting the commandments of the Torah, that we had to live in the Holy Land, where it's like the garden of the God, to live there and uphold these commandments. And when we were told to do that, we were told that we have to be on a very high level of holiness. Eventually, through the books of the prophets, Ezekiel, Isaiah, Jeremiah, all the prophets, the Jews were warned that they're not on that high level, and therefore they will be banished, they will be sent out of the land, which came about around 2,000 years ago with the destruction of the temple of King Solomon's temple. When we were sent into exile, and spread out throughout the world, every Jew understood that this was not because we were lacking in physical might and in an army. It was because it was a godly decree, because we were not spiritually on the level we had to be, and we accepted this was a decree of exile, and we were put on the oath by God through the prophecy in King Solomon's prophecy, and we were put on the 3 oaths. One, that we are not to return en masse in large numbers to the Holy Land,
which is exactly right now. It's like, there is a mass,
movement. That's what we'll get.
Yeah.
And secondly, we are not to rebel against any nation. We have to be loyal citizens in every country where we're residing, and be thankful and pray for the well-being of the country where we're residing. Thirdly, not to make any attempt to end the exile of God. We do believe, eventually, that the day will come, as we do in all, it's the essence of Jewish prayer, that we pray for God's compassion, that He should accept our repentance, and one day we believe, without any human intervention, God will make a miracle. We will all wake up one day, and there will be a godly spirit in the world, where all humanity will accept the one God, and we will serve Him in harmony. And all the nations will go up, and we will serve Him and go back. Then we will return as a people, as a nation. Till that day comes, we are expressly, as I said, forbidden to go up and create even 1 inch of nationhood, of sovereignty. That was accepted prior to Palestine, to any type of, before the Ottoman Empire, before any, Jews knew it was a given. We are in exile, we are not to make 1 inch of Jewish sovereignty. This is a decree of exile, that's the basics of Judaism, and that we have to live our lives in the service of God and pray. For ultimately, our purpose on this world is to bring glory to God through our actions, by emulating God, by being good people, by upholding all the commandments of the Torah. Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, and all what the Torah requires.
Yeah, this is actually, if you allow me to interrupt you, actually this is leads me to talk about the 3rd temple, the building the 3rd temple. Right now, we are witnessing right now, a lot of brutal attack against Palestinian and Jerusalem. They want to destroy the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and this has been done by Jewish settlers who are described as ultra-Orthodox Jewish,
Right.
who believe they need
Right,
to destroy. On what basis they are trying to do this?
Yeah, so let me just finish that first, the issue, the basics of the difference of Zionism.
Yeah, go ahead.
Basically, so we were put under these 3 oaths. We are not to attempt to rebuild the temple. We believe in our prayers, as I said. Our purpose in life is to serve God and to emulate God, to uphold the Torah, the covenant that we have with God. If we will do this, then a person from his day he's born till he dies, we believe this is the purpose of a person, to serve God, not for materialistic gains, to bring glory to God. The pinnacle and of the great, what we're trying to achieve, is when the world will recognize the one God and the whole world will serve Him in harmony, which we believe God will one day make happen. That will come about. It will be a miraculous event. It will not be. It will be a metaphysical, something different than that we know today, because atheists will stop being atheists. So we believe that will come. So we pray for this day. Then we will return. We believe, and we say in our prayers, every Jewish person who says the Jewish prayers, that the day will come when the Almighty will rebuild Himself without any human intervention, mind you. Will rebuild the temple, will rebuild Jerusalem through fire. It says fire meaning spiritual, however God will do it Himself. And then we will all go up, and it says, that's in Hebrew, all the nations will come. We say in the prayers, all the nations will come and join up together. So if I have to come with somebody with force and say, believe me, give it to me, it's mine, then you see it's totally false. It flies in the face of the teaching of the Torah. So this was Judaism 101. 2,000 years we respected and upheld this belief in exile, and that we have to repent and serve God and pray, as every Jew does pray, for the ultimate day when the God will make this revelation, where all the world will recognize God. That's the basics of Judaism. Now, when Zionism came about, they were, as a whole, non-religious. They detested the religion as a whole. Theodor Herzl, he proudly announced he's not circumcising his son. These were anti-religious.
It was atheist, actually.
Right, and then we'll go through the litany of them. Transform Judaism into something else, a new type of ersatz Judaism, a nationalism.
Yeah.
Now, when they're doing this, so firstly, all these issues that I've just mentioned, the oaths that God put us under, and the essence of what it means to be a Jew, to serve God, not to have a land. All these things, all these facets are breached and totally destroyed, so to say, by this concept of Zionism. It's a totally different thing.
I see.
Now, but adding on to all of that is the fact that being that they decided, only for practical purposes, when they decided to make this nationalism, this new Judaism, they wanted to go to a practical place to do this, where it's a lush land, Uganda, they wanted to go to Patagonia, and the next to Argentina. But when they realized that they need massive amounts of money and support from the world, from the evangelistic Christians and from the many Jews that they'll have to get, so they decided to go to and claim by infusing onto this, incorporating the religion Judaism and claiming that this is the dream that Jews have been praying and yearning for, the return to Palestine. Although the land wasn't good, it was many problems with the land, but still they felt, well, this way we're going to get such massive support, we'll be able to build the land and we'll have the backing of the world and the unaffiliated Jews, the Jews who are ignorant of the Torah, and they'll support us and they'll play on their emotions, how we suffered and this and that. So they came home. So now by doing that, what they've done is, after the Torah, so God forbid they can't wipe it out, but they've breached and totally trampled on the Torah. Gives us half the Torah, let us say, is about you shall not steal, you shall not kill, that you must show gratitude for the lands that have done good for you. They're taking all the Palestinian people, which was the majority of the land, were Muslim, and then there was a Christian, which was the second largest group, a small but a very noticeable minority, and they've taken all these people. And mind you, there was a third group called the Jews who were living there, who were a minority, but they were anti-Zionist, they were religious, and they totally ignored their rights, all these people. And since they've come over 100 years already, they're trampling on the people of Palestine, totally breaching and the laws of thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, and all these things in the name of religion, using our religion, taking our name. So Zionism is the antithetical of what it means to be a Jew. Yet they have the audacity to use the Star of David, our symbols, our name, and they speak in our name constantly. They call it a Jewish state, and this is the greatest nakba for us. It is a triple tragedy. It's what's happening to the Palestinian creation, people that was created by the Almighty, and they're suffering unsufferable. There's no words to describe, and we are humiliated and frustrated because nobody hears the voice of the Jewish people who demand that this should be stopped immediately. And I will just add that in our book we have. That's okay.
You can.
Yeah. I don't know where it fell, but it's oh, here it is. Okay. Yeah. It's called Traditional Torah Opposition to Zionism. We have reams of documents and so forth, and the chief rabbi of Palestine, who was the chief rabbi of, nothing to do with the Zionist rabbinate or their farce called Israeli rabbinate and the chief rabbi, but there was a rabbinate for the Jewish communities. And they pleaded with the United Nations from day one. We had Rabbi Sonnenfeld, who pleaded in the 1920s and before with the British High Commission and so forth. And then later when there was the United Nations, so the chief rabbi at the time in 1947 was Rabbi Dushinsky of blessed memory. He pleaded with the United Nations in a letter.
He rejected the state of Israel.
He said, we furthermore wish to express our definite opposition to a Jewish state in any part of Palestine. This is recorded in the United Nations records, and we have the pictures of they even have the pictures and the some of it could be of all of that. So he asked you the settlers. Now we'll get to that question.
Yeah, because it's like before you answer me, I would like to read some quotes from rabbis who are like religious rabbis who look like the way you look. Yes. And look what he says, his name is Rabbi Yisroel Dovid. He's the director of Summit Institute. He said, all of the Palestinians must be killed, men, women, and infants. Justifying the killing, it's totally opposite what you said, Judaism, don't kill, don't steal, which makes sense, there is no such religion says, go and kill. But, however, he justified the killing by saying this, Palestinians are like the nation of Amalekites. Amalekites, Al-Amalika, who used to, in the cannons, who used to live like in Palestine before Moses came with the Jewish, and he said Amaleks that attacked the Israeli tribes on their way to Jerusalem after they had fled from Egypt under the leadership of Moses. So they religiousized the killing of Palestinians. There must be something they read in Talmud or something, if it's like misinterpretation or what makes religious people talk in this way, like because we understand if secularist people like talk, like Ben Gurion, Netanyahu or whatever, we do understand that it's politics. But when it comes from the tongue of people like who pray for God and they they just practice Judaism, that what make us questioning what is going on.
It hurts, but it's a very, very simple issue. As a whole, and you can see the pictures and who they were non-religious. At the beginning, when they created this movement of Zionism, they've taken, in order to give it legitimacy, there's always a bad apple, in a barrel, and they were able, with money, to almost entirely that way, but also other ways, they were able to get some backing from somebody who's professes himself to be religious, to be a rabbi, and I'm not saying that these people don't, some of them could have encyclopedia knowledge, but that does not make them bad, that make them good or bad. A person, we hope, would be good and follow what he preaches, but there are always bad people. Now they took certain people and they used them as tools to be able to come and to tell people why it is kosher, so to say, or halal, or somehow that according to the religion. Now, we have in the Talmud a statement that says that we're not allowed to eat worms. Jews are not allowed to eat worms, just like we're not allowed to eat pigs, we're not allowed to eat worm or swine. So worms are also just as it's totally forbidden. Yet, the rabbis give a metaphor. They say there's 150 ways that I could prove to you that it's kosher. Even though it's not. So you take a lawyer, and a guy can be totally guilty, but if he has the best team of lawyers, they'll get him freed. The same thing here. The Zionists come with an example. What they did was that they said, yes, the Talmud says that we are under oath and that we're not allowed to return. But at the same time, God in the same prophecy warned the nations that although the Jewish people are spread out in the world, but you should not oppress them excessively, and that they're in exile. Don't oppress them excessively. Being that they were oppressed excessively, so this negates and makes null the oaths that they shouldn't return. That's one of a common Zionist mantra, that they say, oh, these oaths, yeah, but it was negated because the other nations oppressed the Jewish people, so therefore the whole oath fell to the side. It's ridiculous, and the ones who are true to Judaism, as a whole, we have books put out, that we have many, but anybody who lived in the Jewish community in Europe, and I'm, thank God, close to 60, and my parents were from Europe, from Poland, and from Hungary, and all the Eastern European communities. It was a given. Somebody became a Zionist meant that he left the folds of Judaism. Almost entirely, all the Jewish communities, if they found somebody to be a Zionist, they ostracized them. And then we put out a book called The Rabbis Speak Out, which is a compilation of a 130-year record of religious Jewish opposition to Zionism. This is just a compilation of not just regular rabbis, but the leading of Torah authorities that everybody accepts. In the law books, we have law books here that I have right behind me, that one of the codifiers of the law recently was the Chavetz Chaim, they called him, the one who wants life. That was his name was Rabbi Cohen. And he, as the many others, I'll just quote one statement he wrote. He says, the Zionists are dead limbs of our people, which causes the entire body to rot. I'm just giving an example. Yeah, sure. This is Rabbi Yisroel Dovid. He passed away in 1933, way before the state. He was born in 1839. And he was one of the greatest leaders, recognized. Nobody refutes that he was one of the top leaders of Judaism, and yet he was, as everybody else, was strongly opposed to Zionism and didn't accept it. And everybody understood it's just totally contradictory to Judaism. There's no question. And their goals were to accomplish God's will. Although they present this holiness and this aura of spirituality, say, oh, we're returning to the land that God promised us. They don't believe in God, and they desecrate the Sabbath. They made a whole new law system, mind you. They have a court system, which is the Torah breaches. God gave us a Torah with all the details, the whole life of a person, business transaction, everything, and yet they detest the religion. They're hypocritical in its essence. Yet, being that the world just hears their view and sees what they say, they think that these Zionists that you're talking about, these so-called rabbis who come and make these statements, are somehow representing Judaism. What they will do is they can always find a verse. Like you say, they speak about a Molech. They'll take a verse out, they'll take something out of context and use that to totally misconstrue how a Jew has to be. But if you will step back and look at the Jewish communities around the world, you will find that the vast majority, the ones invariably, if they're more religious, from Al-Quds, from Jerusalem, to London, to New York, to Australia, to Argentina, where there's pockets of the very religious community especially, they're clearly anti-Zionist and they don't accept this. What are we talking about? You'll have to kill, you'll have to steal. It's disgusting, it's deplorable, and there's no words, and these people are not only not representing God, they're just despicable, and there's no words.
Well, there is there is the historian and journalist Alan Hart. He wrote in his book, Zionism is the real enemy of Jews.
Yes.
So do you think right now the ideology of Zionism is provoking anti-Semitism?
No question. That is an issue that, although many times the time allotment when we're speaking doesn't give us that time to speak about this precious point, Zionism supposedly is the protectors, the heroes to protect the Jews, and although they're entirely flying in the face of the Torah and totally against the laws of the Torah, but they emotional, and we have to have a country that protects us. But the logic actually defies this, and the logic tells us that this is totally wrong, because they are the biggest factory of exacerbating anti-Semitism. Jewish people in Europe, Jewish people around the world are constantly suffering because of the animosity that is created when the people constantly see in the news what the state of Israel is doing to people, to the Palestinian people in Gaza, and altogether what they're doing. And not only that, but in the Jewish people, till Zionism came about, this is a fact on the ground, and flourished in every Muslim country and every Arab land, almost in its entirety. Maybe you'll find a teeny little place that they didn't live, but they flourished in Yemen, in Tunisia, in Morocco, in Egypt, and go on, and in Iran. In every country, the Jewish community flourished distinctly as Jews, as practicing Jews, and they were helped and by the governments, and they flourished. They put out the greatest rabbinical scholars that we've had through ages, from Maimonides till recently the greatest scholars that we've had. They came from the Arab and Muslim countries. And what happened? What happened to these communities today? You can find small communities, and we're very thankful, for instance, in Iran, the Jewish community exists, and they're able to practice their religion, or in other places, but most of the lands, they're gone because people, they're afraid for their lives because of the people equate Zionism with Judaism. And therefore, people think that if they're a Jew, they're a Zionist, and the Jewish people themselves were afraid to continue to live there because they should not be accused of being affiliated with Zionism. And the Zionists kept on using propaganda to have them. They put bombs in synagogues in Iraq. There's books put out about that. It's called scandals, and different from somebody Giladi, and there's many other. They were caught red-handed, inciting and instigating and putting fear into the Jews that they were being chased out of the land. They actually put bombs in synagogues that it should look like the Arabs did it. They killed Jews in Yemen. They were caught. This was all done so the Jews should panic and run away and go to Palestine, which they keep on inciting. I could go on and on. So these Jews today, you go to Yemen, you have a few thousand Jews. You go here, you go to Egypt, you'll find cemeteries, vast cemeteries. You can see that the communities flourished, and synagogues that till recently were beautiful because they're still there, and the communities are not there. Why? Purely because of Zion. They've destroyed the Middle Eastern and African and Jewish communities. They've one-handedly destroyed it with their own hands, all of this because of Zion. Yet they go around announcing that they're the heroes and protectors of Jews. It is so...
it's the opposite. It's not right now like they're causing problems to the Jewish communities around the world. Actually, if you talk about like the Arab land, absolutely the image of Judaism right now, it's really acquainted with Zionism or Israel. Like if you ask someone like what's the first image comes to your mind, like when you say Yahud,
right.
It's always like connected to Israel. Like they're occupying us, we must fight
right.
them. And this is the truth. But right now, to the West actually.
Yes.
Right now we see like actually there is a lot of studies about because of the news, the social media. People cannot handle these images right now. Like it's done by called Jewish people like in Palestine. So this is. Do you think like this is also like it affects people like in the West? Like
certainly. The chief rabbi of Palestine and blessed memory, Rabbi Teitelbaum, who was 50 years ago, 40 years ago, around 40 years ago, he was he lived till around 30 odd years ago. He moved out while he with the title, remaining with the title of chief rabbi of Palestine. He moved to America, and he
refused to live in the Israel.
That's right. Okay. And he was very vocal. And he kept on insisting of his students and that they should be speaking up. He said that God's name is being stained and Judaism is being stained and it's being done in our name. We should be very vocal. And you can hear tapes of him when he was spoken. He would cry and say, and this was before all the troubles came out of Zionism for the Jewish people. And he kept on saying, who knows how much bloodshed will come from this terrible tragedy of Zionism. Don't celebrate it. He said, how much bloodshed will come? Again, he has volumes and volumes that he put out.
So
books.
he predicted there are a lot
right.
of bloodshed is going to come and there is a lot of violence.
He said, the first thing he said, it's against God. We're not allowed to have a state for all the reasons that I've given. But he said, on top of all of that, how much bloodshed, how much hate and animosity. So the ripple effect and the repercussions around the world, yes, in Palestine. I mean, I have my colleagues, you've met one, Rabbi Rosenberg, and I've met many colleagues who are 8th-generation Palestinians. We have people alive today who still remember 60 and 70 years ago. They're still alive, thank God. And they remember how they lived in the same courtyards with Palestinian, Arab, and Muslims, and they babysat each other's children and so forth. The life there's a difference of religion. Certainly, we have a distinctly different religion, but we lived together. It was never an impediment of coexistence. Zionism came and created this rift, this deep rift, and suspicion and mistrust. All what Zionism does. That's of course there, but of course the repercussions is in other Arab and Muslim lands, and then further. And we're not condoning violence, but we're saying this is a fact. This is what Zionism has done. They've created an endless river of bloodshed and hate from the Holy Land, from Palestine, to all the way to the other end of the world. And this is a fact in the United States. Just today they announced that they're going to put police by the synagogues now because of what happened in the unfortunate events that would happen in Israel. So what you're having, what was it all because of? Is it because of the evil people of Gaza or of Palestine? It's because the evil Zionism and the Zionists who took a land away from people, and the automatic result, the reaction is, if you'll take Rhode Island from the United States, people will come from Africa and say, we need a country, and they're going to take just the smallest state they can, Rhode Island, they say, this is ours. What will America do? Again, we'll reiterate endless times, we're not condoning violence, but the nature is that if you oppress a people, this is what the result will be. And the people from around the world who aren't even associated with this, but they look and they see the inhumane inhumanity of it all, and they look at the people as a whole. And unfortunately, like we've said, they took the Star of David and Jewish symbols and calling it Israel, and so forth, which is a name from the Bible. My name is Yisroel. That's Israel, basically. So what they're doing, they want that. The state of Israel wants it to be referred to and to be one and the same as Judaism, and therefore they create hate. And here in West also, it's all a small world today with the internet,
with the media, with the internet, and the youth right now, they travel, they talk.
Right. And for Zionism, it's a win-win situation, because the more there is anti-Semitism, which again, it's anti-Zionism. But what happens is, a lot of times, some people can have basic anti-Semitism, that's certain. But anti-Zionism becomes anti-Semitism a lot of times because people don't know to differentiate, and they like to accuse everybody who stands up against the state, or automatically they refer to them as anti-Semites. And so when they want this, because then they say, you see, we have to have a state as an insurance policy. So they play on this. They're the only ones who gain, who profit from anti-Semitism. They build and they grow from anti-Semitism. So in every facet, it's wrong in its essence. It's wrong, and it's just one big nakba, a quagmire, a tragedy for the world.
Okay, so we talk about action and reaction. So right now, there is a state of Israel, and this state of Israel is established upon the state, or the nation of Palestine. Do you think the resistance, the Palestinian resistance, is justified?
The question is, excuse me.
Hopefully this is not a heavy question.
No, it's a very heavy question, but it's very simple. We as a Jewish people follow the laws of the Torah. And the way the Torah, this is our only way, as I said, started with our life is to follow the Torah, to keep the covenant with God. We were told when Esau, the brother of Yaakov, came, wanted to kill him. So Yaakov did what God required. He prayed to God, asked God that if he sinned, he should be forgiven and so forth, and that he prayed to for his protection. Then he went and delivered presents. This is in the Torah, in the Bible. And he delivered him presents. And then he divided his camp into two. It says he had 4 wives. He divided them into 2 camps, and so that if God forbid one is attacked, the others can escape. And our rabbis, following that, who teach us from the Torah, write that they're teaching us whatever it said in the Torah is to teach us, that throughout the generations, giving us a guide on how we should live our lives. That if God forbid we are attacked by anybody, the way is to pray to God, ask repentance, be introspective, see how we have to better ourselves, and then try to placate and get back the good of the friendship of the people who are attacking us, even if they're bad and evil, and even if they're enemies. That is the approach. And if that doesn't work, to run away, not to fight, not to. So the concept in our Jewish suffering from the Crusades, or the Inquisition in Spain, all the Jewish rabbis always told the way of the system of our Jews is through prayer, and not through shooting and such. So we can't condone, and we do not go into the issue of what other nations do in their suffering. We say though that the end of the day, what is the cause of the bloodshed? What is the one who has to be responsible and pointed out as the guilty party? It's Zionism, because they've come totally illegally, stolen the land, oppressed the people, killed, maimed, sent people into the largest, what we call the largest camp, open air camp, Gaza. People are suffering physically, emotionally, and they're the cause of all this. So they're going to keep on saying, today it's Hamas and Hezbollah, it's this, it was the PLO 20 years ago, it's this and that, because they want to confuse that people should be busy vilifying and attacking, when it's an end. There's no end in sight for all this, and it's repugnant, because this will never bring the true result, because you can't oppress the people and expect that it's going to be, are we condoning violence? No. Are we saying we don't, this is not, never our approach, but if you want to stop the violence, step back and say, let's get down to tax. What's happening here? What brought this about? What is the way to the solution? This, remove the impediment to peace, not the religion. It wasn't that the religions had a problem or the people who practiced the religion had a problem. We lived together. History shows before there was a United Nations, before there was any human rights groups to protect, without any necessity of protection, we lived in, and I personally went to Yemen 20 odd years ago. There was in the middle of a tribal war, mind you, and everybody as a custom carries knives over there. I think it's a Jabal.
Jabbiya.
20 years ago. And small young children carry, they have guns. It was like the Wild West, we call it. And they stopped our car on the road. There was like checkpoints because it looked in the middle of the tribe, and they looked at Yehud, go, because they knew we weren't part of this tribal warfare. And we lived amongst these people as the neighbors, friends. I went to places into towns and villages, and people were so friendly. They came in and they just walked, just strolled in when we came to a house, and the neighbors, the Arab neighbors, came into the Jewish houses and they sat down and everybody spoke Shutgat and spoke. But this is the way the life was. So you see that it's not the religion. So what happened here in Palestine? All of a sudden, that is such that they can't live together. Zionism says it's an ingrained hate from Muslims to Jews. And how despicable that is, because the fact is, till they came, we were living together in the same quarters, and people lied to show. They are the cause. They are the bloodshed. Their hands are covered in blood. They are the cause. Remove them. So what our position and how we, how we face, the issues is neither here nor there. Which, as I say, as Jews, we don't use this system of ours. But that's neither here nor there. You want to stop it. That's what the discussion should be. Stopping it is removing the cause of bloodshed. This stand that was put in the eye, which is called Zionism.
It's not going to be easy or by talk.
We as a Jewish people are required by the Almighty to stand up and let everybody know that the evil and the cause of all of this terrible quagmire, this terrible nakba, what we have there, this terrible situation is Zionism. And they're the ones that should be addressed. And this is what should be addressed immediately by the world governments, by the world, to see how to remove, God help, peacefully and speedily, and remove this issue, because that is the only way that we will be able to have a true peace and a lasting peace. Because that is what's impeding, that they've taken the Palestinian people away from their homes. We as Jews, as again, we have to follow the Torah. We're not to mix in politics. We're not. We use our system, as I said.
Actually, I'm going to talk in politics right now.
But I say, but we have our prayer. We have our ways of prayer, and as I say, this would be by enemies, true enemies. We would our approach would be through prayer and through placating and pacifying, and if necessary, to run away. So we're not going to talk about how other issues are, but when people talk about it, they want to know from us what our opinion is. We say our opinion. You want to, because you're asking, because not just for curiosity. You're asking because you want to know what is the proper solution here. What the proper is. The solution. You're looking for the truth. You're looking for. Go look at Zionism and see that this is the cancer. This is the tumor that keeps on growing, that is sucking the life out of the Holy Land. Remove it, and we will have peace.
Okay, let's switch from the Holy Land to United States.
Yes.
Zionism here, it's big issue in politics. We do want to talk about politics, but we have to a little bit.
Right.
Like I heard Joe Biden, the Vice President of United States, he insisted several times, I am a Zionist. It's not necessary to be Jewish to be a Zionist. I am a Zionist. How do you characterize, this kind of interfering in the politics here,
That again, that is one of our issues that we have. We're required as a Jew to stand up and let the world know that they have been conned, that they're being misled. Now we're very thankful for the evangelistic Christians and for the United States. We're really thankful for people with heart and human rights people who are interested, and they say Jews suffered and they want to help them. We're thankful to them. We know that they mean it, many of them, most of them was probably the vast majority mean from the goodness of their hearts that they sympathize with Jewish suffering.
Biden, like, you know, who wants to help Jewish?
Well, I can't go into a personal, you know, go see what's in the hearts of people. I'm not a seer, prophet or anything of that, but I can just say that the vast majority of people mean well, but therefore we turn to them and we plead with them that they're totally being conned. You see, the Zionism came with this approach, as I've said. They wanted to make it in Uganda, their state, in Patagonia.
Yeah,
they just wanted a national home, and it probably would have fallen apart.
New York was one of the options.
Also Rochester, I've heard. But if they would have just come and said, "I want to make a land in Patagonia," and then there would have been the people of Patagonia said, "Excuse me, it belongs to us," everybody would have just dropped their cause. But they went and they used Palestine as a ploy, because they knew they could wave the Bible as a deed to the land, and then say, "See, God gave it to us, and you believe in God. You're a Christian. You believe in God, and you're Jewish. You're supposed to believe in God, or whatever." So they turned to all these people, and the mostly almost entirely religious Jews, and the few from the religious community who fell into their thing. And so they say, "Look, God promised us, and every Jew prays to return." They keep on using that Jews, we pray every year to return to but we mean, as I've started, that we pray for the revelation when God will reveal His world, all humanity will recognize God and go up together and serve, not to take away the land from the past. So they use these concepts willfully, knowing that they're leaving out the whole soul and the heart of what it's all about. And so this is what they speak to the American public, and they say, "Look." But they also count on the ignorance, which was till now, before there was internet and all that. So they were able to count and said, "Oh, the land was a land without a people, for a people without a land." Because nobody did. There was no television. There was nothing in those days when they started. And then they said that the Arabs and the Muslims, because most of America was not Muslim. So they were able to count again on the ignorance and say, "Oh, they just don't countenance other people from other religions. And then just unfriendly, and they hate Jews." Even though that's so despicable, as I've said, Jews found a safe haven by the Crusades, by the Inquisition. Where did the Jews find a safe haven to run to? They opened their arms and they opened the doors. The Muslim and Arab countries taken the Jews, and they were the most gracious hosts. They turn and they're counting on the ignorance of the West, and they say, "See, these people are not to be trusted, and they're not good, and they're enemies of us." And so they use this and the sympathy of the Jews that suffered, that they should get the support. So till today they have AIPAC, American Israeli Political Alliance Committee, which is not as large as people think, but they're efficient. They use their power to put the fear of God in people's hearts. So a politician knows that if he's going to dare support the Palestinian issue, or going to speak up something against Israel, he's committing political suicide by doing that.
Which is true. A lot of people, lost their jobs.
There was a book by Finley, Congressman Finley, and many others. Many others had people know that you can't be. And why? Not because the American people are bad. It's because they count on that they don't have any other knowledge except what's fed to them by the media, major media outlets and all that, and they keep on, which is owned, some of them become glamorized by Jewish or have a lot of input on them, and they're very efficient. So what these media, the mainstream outlets, so what they do is, and you can hear it, it's constant in New York, constant. The news outlets are busy with the Zionist view and the Zionist portrayal of what was happening there, constantly, and really the vilification of the Palestinian people. I give an example. You have, again, we're not condoning violence, but just take an example. By World War II, there was a French underground, and they did what they did. And let's just say, God forbid, Germany, the Nazis would have taken over France. And the French would continue doing it. And eventually, they would come one day and they would say to the people of France, 65 years, 68, almost 70 years now after, you keep on putting bombs, you have to stop this, we have to make it. So, and they say, "You know what, we'll stop bombing, we just want to have peace, be able to live the way we are, as we can." So he said, "No, that's not good enough. You have to get up there and make announcements that you recognize the legitimacy of Nazism and the takeover of the land." Who in their right mind would demand that? Yet they demanded when the Palestinian people had the vote in Gaza and they won the elections, and it was clear, they said they hadn't used any militancy for a long period of time. They said they will stop bombing and they will they should be able to have a peaceful existence. They said, no, that's not enough. You must declare the recognition of the legitimacy of the state of Israel. Why is that acceptable to the world? So you're asking, you understand that
it's very hard, like, to ask, people, like, to recognize, the oppressed, recognize the oppressor.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
To ask the occupied people to recognize the occupied.
The legitimacy of the occupied.
It's not easy. That's what I keep, emphasize on, when someone says, I don't recognize Israel, they call it as a crime.
That's what I'm saying. It flies in the face of logic. It defies logic, and this is a fact. But they so vilify the Palestinian people that just bad, and why? Because they incorporated that they're anti-Semites. They hate the Jews, ignoring the fact, as I've said, how they've treated that the Jewish people without any protection, any government protection, any United Nations, we lived and flourished in these lands. And part of Judaism, mind you, is to show gratitude for good, that we're required to show gratitude on. These lands, we should, giving our hearts for them, and showing our gratitude for these lands that gave us a home. Even by the Nazis, the Muslim countries provided a home in many of those lands. And throughout history they did. How could we now go and say that they hate the Jews, and it's an ingrained hate, and this is the root cause and why the people of Palestine don't accept the state of Israel? But they do that, and that is why you find in America so much sympathy for the support of the state of Israel and the vilification of the Palestinians. At the root of it, I'm a religious Jew, so at the root of this we say that it's the Satan, the Shaitan who's driving this, because it defies logic. That they ratified the state defies logic, because there was the majority of people living there were Muslims, and the very Jewish community. The chief rabbi pleaded with the United Nations. He said, we don't want this Jewish state. They were oppressed, the Jewish community that was there, by the Zionists. We have pictures from then till today, how Jews are being brutally beaten. You can see, this is a picture from the day one, when the Zionists came up, the Jewish community made demonstrations, they protested. They were assassinated. The leaders of our Jewish communities were assassinated there. Dr. Dahan, who arranged a meeting with the king of Transjordan, with Rabbi Sonnenfeld, the chief rabbi of Palestine, his name was Dr. Dahan. In 1924, he was shot in the streets of Jerusalem from the Haganah. It's in their own records. Why? Because he arranged a meeting with the chief rabbi of Palestine, together with the king of Transjordan, where the chief rabbi delivered a message. We have that message, a memorandum.
And I think we will go through it.
Yeah, we have to, because it's very interesting, because he speaks about the Temple Mount there. So it's important to see. I mean, maybe I'll just mention that one comment that he made. He said to them, because the Zionists right away started demanding the Temple Mount, and he wrote to the Honorable Muslim Congress of Jerusalem, December 6, 1931. This is from the chief rabbi, Sonnenfeld, of blessed memory, and he writes, we completely deny any suspicion that we want to demand rights to your holy site that is called the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the other holy sites located on the Temple Mount. The Congress will do, it's important to declare before those gathered before the Muslim world that Jews have no intention to challenge the rights of Muslims to the holy site or even to demand any rights to these places. Just as we do not want others to challenge our rights to sites holy to us. And he goes on and on. He says, he speaks to the King Hussein of the Hejaz. In 1924, this is a letter, to His Majesty, in the name of God, the High Lord, Creator of heaven and earth, we feel honored to stand with His Majesty, representatives of the World Jewish Organization, Agudas Yisrael, and Eid HaChareidus, which means God-fearing community, in the holy city of Jerusalem, organized. He says,
we will read this.
Yeah, so we have many. So that's what I'm just saying, that America is under, intimidated. Many of the ones who are the leaders are intimidated because of the accusation of being anti-Semitic, and many of them they fall into the prey of the narrative of the Zionists. But that is where it comes from, But so when you ask why people are supporting it, that is why it's so crucial that interviews like this, that they should, their eyes, they should become aware of the Jewish, the communities here that you have right across from Manhattan, Williamsburg. It's the largest concentration of religious Jews in the United States, and there's not one Israeli. They're all anti-Zionist. You don't have to be a friend of the Jews. Because by supporting, it doesn't mean that you're a friend of the Jews by supporting Israel. If you don't support Israel and you stand against what the Zionists are doing, you can still be just as much the friend of Israel, and even more, because as we've spoken earlier, anti-Semitism gets exacerbated millionfold because of what they're doing, because of the Zionist occupation.
Rabbi Weiss, thank you so much.
Thank
My
you.
pleasure to talk to you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much. Thank you.